Hello from Echo from the past, and today we will discuss the Egyptian-Libyan War, aka the Four-Day War. In the summer of 1977, two Arab nations, Egypt and Libya, clashed in a brief but explosive military confrontation along their shared desert border. Known as the Egyptian-Libyan War, or more commonly the Four-Day War, the conflict was not merely a border skirmish. It was the culmination of years of ideological divergence, political rivalry, and personal animosity between two of the Arab world's most prominent leaders, President Anwar Sadat of Egypt and Colonel Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. Though the war lasted only 4 days, it had profound implications for regional politics, Arab unity, and the future of diplomacy in the Middle East. This war was a turning point that demonstrated how the dreams of pan-Arabism could dissolve into confrontation, even between once allied states. Following the decline of colonial powers in the mid-20th century, Arab nationalism surged throughout the Middle East and North Africa. This movement, championed by leaders like Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, called for unity among Arab states, resistance to Western influence, and opposition to Israel. Egypt, the most populous and influential Arab state, was a natural leader of the movement. After Nasser's death in 1970, his successor Anwar Sadat initially continued his policies, but gradually began to diverge from Nasser's ideology. Meanwhile, in Libya, a young army officer named Muammar Gaddafi had overthrown King Idris in 1969 and seized power. Gaddafi was heavily influenced by Nasser's pan-Arabist vision. He admired Egypt and saw himself as Nasser's ideological heir. He dreamed of merging Arab countries into a single state, with Libya playing a central role. While Gaddafi pushed for Arab unity, Sadat had begun charting a different course. Egypt, reeling from economic hardship and military defeats, needed peace. After the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Sadat grew increasingly convinced that diplomacy with the United States and even peace with Israel were necessary to secure Egypt's future. This alarmed Gaddafi, who viewed any dialogue with Israel as treason. As Sadat moved toward peace, particularly in preparation for the 1978 Camp David Accords, Gaddafi became one of his fiercest critics. What began as political differences soon turned personal, with both leaders trading insults and accusations through media and diplomacy. In the early 1970s, Gaddafi repeatedly proposed political union with Egypt, but Sadat dismissed these overtures as impractical. Sadat viewed Gaddafi as unstable and impulsive, and had no interest in merging Egypt's struggling economy and governance with Libya's oil-rich but politically erratic system. By 1976 and 1977, relations deteriorated further. Egypt accused Libya of supporting dissidents and subversive groups operating within Egypt. Meanwhile, Libya accused Egypt of betraying Arab causes and hosting Israeli spies. This led to border skirmishes, and clashes between patrols became increasingly frequent. In early 1977, both nations began mobilizing troops along the border. Egypt conducted military exercises near Libya, and Libya threatened retaliation. The situation had become a tinderbox. On July 21, 1977, Egyptian forces crossed into eastern Libya in what they described as a preemptive strike against Libyan provocations. The Egyptian military launched a coordinated attack using mechanized infantry, tanks, and air support. Key targets included the border town of Mused, which was quickly overrun, Gambut Air Base, where Egyptian airstrikes damaged Libyan assets and supply lines and infrastructure critical to Libya's eastern defense. The Egyptian army was battle-tested and better organized, having seen recent combat experience in the 1973 war. Libya's military, while flush with Soviet-supplied equipment, was poorly trained and struggled to mount an effective defense. Despite initial setbacks, Libyan forces began mounting resistance. Gaddafi mobilized airstrikes and attempted to rally militias and paramilitary forces to defend key positions. The Libyan Air Force launched attacks against Egyptian convoys and tried to intercept Egyptian aircraft. However, Egypt maintained air superiority. Their more experienced pilots and better coordination allowed them to neutralize several Libyan counterattacks. Gaddafi also called for a people's resistance, hoping tribal groups in the region would rally to Libya's defense. However, this had minimal impact on the battlefield. By July 24, Egyptian forces had advanced roughly 20 to 25 kilometers into Libyan territory and held several strategic points. At this stage, neither side wanted a prolonged war. Egypt's economy was too fragile for a sustained campaign, and Libya, though rich in oil, was militarily unprepared. Diplomatic pressure mounted rapidly. Algeria, Syria, and other Arab states intervened diplomatically. A ceasefire was brokered, and Egyptian forces withdrew voluntarily, having demonstrated their military superiority. The war deepened the divide between moderate and radical Arab states. Egypt's pivot toward peace with Israel continued, culminating in the 1978 Camp David Accords and the 1979 Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty. As a result, Egypt was suspended from the Arab League in 1979, and most Arab states, including Libya, severed diplomatic ties with Egypt. In addition, Gaddafi increased support for anti-Western and revolutionary movements globally. President Anwar Sadat emerged from the war domestically strengthened. He had shown resolve and military strength, reinforcing his image ahead of peace talks with Israel. While Muammar Gaddafi, despite losing the war, doubled down on his anti-Western rhetoric and ideological projects. He became more isolated, but remained a dominant figure in Libyan politics for decades. Unlike Egypt's wars with Israel or Libya's later conflicts with the US and Chad, the 1977 war is rarely discussed today. It lasted only 4 days, produced limited casualties, and did not alter borders. Yet, it marked the last war between Arab states until the Gulf War in 1991, and it signaled the end of one era of unified Arab resistance and the beginning of another: fragmentation, realignment, and political pragmatism. The Egyptian-Libyan War of 1977 was short, but its impact was significant. It exposed the cracks in Arab nationalism, intensified ideological divisions, and set the stage for Egypt's historic peace with Israel. Thank you for watching.